All right, welcome to a NFL Week 14 edition of the RotoWire Sports Gambling Podcast. I am Nick Whalen. I am joined by my good, close personal friend, John McKechnie. John, we got a monster Week 14 to break down. We'll look back at I think, even more monster Week 13 in terms of volume of games, some of the huge matchups we had in the late window. Both of our parlays cashed last week, John. That is a first for this pod since we started tossing out parlays a couple of weeks ago. Your Baltimore Ravens, you are personally responsible for this. They sunk the teaser. We almost went 3 for 3 on teasers. They could not cover 1.5, John, against the Denver Broncos. But of course, they did find a way to get that win. We will certainly dive in more on the Baltimore Ravens. But how are you doing, man? I know you were at a poetry reading earlier this week. You and I both have wedding weekends coming up. A lot going on, but how's everything going?
Yeah, it's I think most of our listeners kind of expect if there's a weekend coming up that you have a wedding. But I'm getting in on the fun this weekend as well. Yes, did go see a buddy as the featured reader at the Athens Word of Mouth event last night. That was a lot of fun. And then, not to bring it down too much, but more like I have a little bit of extra inspiration for today. Is with a heavy heart that I must report that my favorite internet German basset hound, Sir Mortimer, has crossed over the Rainbow Road. Oh, sadly. No. So he brought joy to the Twitter timeline daily with just hilarious German captions and just like a basset hound just being all derpy. So he's in a better place now, playing for Sir Mortimer.
I had no idea. I'm sorry. Had I known, maybe we could have skipped this podcast this week in his honor. But I think he probably would have wanted you to do the pod.
He would have, and he would have also had some nice German dog treats as well.
Oh yeah. We had the RotoWire holiday party this last week because everyone definitely cares about that. But it was a lot of fun. Shout out to the great Jake Ski for planning a fantastic party on Tuesday. The company morale is at an all-time high. I'm RotoWired out. Got my RotoWire shirt, RotoWire hat for those of you watching along on YouTube. The hat, by the way, get so many compliments on this. It is just a well-made. I don't even know what's the word for a hat. Textile, I guess. Does that qualify as a
yes.
textile? But I tell you what, yeah, I love this thing. But yeah, fun week all around. Very much looking forward to another big time NFL Sunday. However, John, we have 6 teams on bye this week. I personally think it should be illegal for this many teams. I don't think any team should be on bye. It's week 14. It's the last regular season week of the fantasy season, and you got 6 teams on bye. We need to fix this. I think maximum of 2 teams on bye this late in the year. I think we need to redistribute these throughout the season. It's not like this every year, right? I think teams have some say, like with the London games and the German games, like when they're, I know Green Bay, for example, requested a late bye this week. They're one of the teams that's off, but we have no Falcons, no Bears, no Packers, no Colts, no Saints. And the only above 500 team in this group, no Washington Commanders.
No, it really makes it tricky for fantasy. I think that the NFL needs to take that into stronger consideration. That they go ahead, they give us the extra week of the regular season, and yet they're screwing around with our fantasy playoffs. This is a huge week for that. Waivers are a mess this week. Pickups, just lineup calls, like your bench is probably thin just because there's teams like it. Yeah, I'm going to be rolling out some absolute garbage in very, very key spots this week. So this is under protest from us officially. This is ridiculous.
Yeah. I made some really, really sad waiver wire pickups this week. Kind of tried to put them in under the cover of night. Maybe see if I could put them in anonymously.
Just wearing a trench coat while you put in your bids.
Exactly. I'm manually calling them into Peter Schenke. Hey, can you just quietly put this guy in my team? Yeah. The RotoWire Invitational, the Vegas League, those are sharp leagues. They're deep. And I need help with 6 teams on bye. But I was saying to Jeff on the XM show, if you could pick 6 teams to put on bye at the same time, these might be the 6 that you would pick. None of these teams have more than maybe 2 or 3 guys that you're all that worried about for fantasy.
Yeah, there's almost like a blessing in disguise element for Kamara managers.
Right.
It's okay, I don't have to make that call if I'm going to bench this Najee guy Harris. Or not.
When Pittsburgh was on bye too, I'm thankfully. And honestly, with the Colts, I keep rolling out Michael Pittman every week. I feel like I have to start him. And yeah, it is kind of cathartic. Now I can put Isaiah Pacheco in my lineup and not feel like I'm missing out on somebody else.
Yeah. So, Kamara for this week really stands out. Antonio Gibson, kind of like he had kind of re-entered that realm where he kind of goes away for a few weeks and then he starts cropping back up. And now I just simply don't have to make that decision anymore for at least this week. And then, the most cathartic of lineup calls, including one of the teams from this week, was Kyle Pitts officially being ruled out for the rest of the season. Is like, all right, now I don't have to bench him and be worried about missing out on a game that may never actually happen for him. I'm a little bit skeptical, although I'm sure by the time draft season rolls around next year, I will have way too much Kyle Pitts once again.
I, on purpose, started Evan Ingram over Kyle Pitts multiple times this year. I mean, I
love a spite start.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And it paid off one week, the other week, not so much. But before we dive in on week 14, I do want to talk about the Atlanta Falcons real quickly. And we won't spend too much time on this because they are one of those 6 teams on bye. So we're not worried about betting them this week. But major news. Finally, we will see Desmond Ritter on the other side of the bye in week 15. We had kind of talked about this these last few weeks. To me, it felt like Tampa Bay storming back and winning that game on Monday night somehow lost Marcus Mariota his starting job for the rest of the season. Because I think if you're Atlanta, you could kind of keep justifying throwing Mariota out there. It's like, yeah, he probably has maybe a slightly higher floor than Desmond Ritter. You're still very much in the mix for that division, but it does feel like Tampa Bay, kind of has a commanding 2-game lead now with a few games left. And unsurprisingly, we'll see Desmond Ritter make his first NFL start next week at New Orleans.
I'm sure that, in some sense, this is a relief for Falcons fans, because I think that the sense that I've gotten is that they're a little bit tired of the team performing not well enough to make the postseason, but not bad enough to get a really high draft pick. Although, we can talk draft another time, but it's not even that great of a year to be picking extremely high this year. It's not looking awesome. But, by virtue of the bye week coming up at a time where, like you said, sort of like that domino meme where there's a guy down on the ground just hitting this one little square and then it topples over these huge things. Tom Brady leading a fourth quarter comeback against the Saints in a very boring game otherwise has suddenly banished Marcus Mariota, and we've gotten to see Desmond Ritter, Jay, frequent guest of this pod, the maintenance guy. We talk Falcons pretty often when I run into him, and his sense was just that, if they keep winning, if they stay in the hunt, then good, and keep seeing what Mariota can do. But the second you're out of the race, you got to at least check out what you have in Desmond Ritter. So this really does kind of work out perfectly for the Falcons. I know that as of a month ago, you were hoping that this wouldn't unfold this way, but now you get like a decent month-long sample of Ritter, and you get to kind of make from that what you want to do in free agency as far as quarterback goes, or if you're interested in one of these guys in the draft at quarterback.
Exactly. And I think with Ritter too, it's like the main selling point with him is like, he's an older prospect. He's seasoned at the college level. Like, this isn't Malik Willis where, you feel like you might need multiple years until you get a fair evaluation of what he can be. Like, I think, 3 or 4 games at the end of the season, that's not going to tell you the entire story, but I think you'll get a relatively decent feel for Desmond Ritter because, he is supposed to be, for a guy who's not a first round pick, fairly NFL ready. So I don't think we see like a massive drop off for the Falcons the rest of the way, but we will cross that bridge this very time a week from now, John, when the Falcons are back in action. I mentioned at the top that we hit both the parlays last week. I think we need to go out of our way to make sure we highlight that before we dive in to week 14. I had Ravens, Packers, Seahawks money line. We hit all 3 of those. You had Bengals, 49ers, Seahawks money line. That was the afternoon delight parlay. That hit at over 3-1. Well done.
Yeah, that felt great. And boy, that Seahawks game, that was dicey. And I'm glad that I went money line instead of spread as far as that one went, because boy, howdy.
I really thought they were going to lose that game. I thought we were going to see a crushing Geno Smith pick on that final drive.
Yes. I mean, we've been conditioned to expect that. And like this year's been so magical for Geno Smith. It's going to take like the rest of this year to like kind of expunge what we know of Geno Smith and accept him as the new an improved Geno Smith 2.0.
Exactly. It might take multiple years before I'm willing to buy in on that. But all right, let's dive in. Week 14. We only have 13 games on the slate this week. As usual, we won't talk Thursday night football. We do record this pod Thursday evening. So Raiders-Rams has not happened yet, but by the time you listen to this, it will have. So best of luck, whatever side you're taking there. I'll be on the Raiders tonight. I can't believe I've made that kind of switch, but if anything, it says more about where the Rams are at this point. But we'll focus on the Sunday and then, of course, the Monday night game slates as well. Which lines to you are standing out as a little too high? I have a few, but I'm curious which game stood out to you.
Sticking kind of with what we were just talking about, I'm a little bit nervous about the Seahawks this week. I think that they are still like a very solid team, but they haven't been performing great of late. And I think being at home, trusting them with more than a field goal in a game that could get pretty funky, I think that I would be more comfortable with them at 3 or 2.5, but at 4, you're kind of asking a little bit there, a little bit more than I'm willing to give right now. So even though it is the Panthers, they're bad, but they're coming off the bye.
Yep.
Could have something cooked up. We'll have to see what's up with Deontay Foreman. I know he came back to practice in a limited fashion. That I love that's like storyline A when it comes to talking about the Panthers. Like, good Lord. But I could just see that game getting a little bit haywire. So that's why I'm a little bit skeptical on the Seahawks. And then the Eagles, I think that magic number of 7, it concerns me. They are one of the worst teams on the road against the spread this year. It's a smaller sample than a lot of teams. This is only their 6th road game, but they're 1-4 against the spread. I might be grading them a little bit too harshly from their performance against the Indianapolis Colts a few weeks back. But even still, I just think that the Giants, the way I described this one in my column this week was, we'll know pretty quickly. Kind of to borrow your logic from a lot of these, which is sound in my opinion. It's just like, we're going to know if the Eagles have this one in control right away, or if they start slow. That's exactly where the Giants want them, and we're in for like a 20-16 type of slog.
Yeah, there's some reports that the weather could be an issue in East Rutherford. It's not supposed to be a beautiful day. I think it's going to be windy on Sunday. I've said over and over, like even if I'm not hitting a ton of bets this year, I've been very, very good at identifying when my bets are going wrong. I can tell you right away by the end of the first quarter, like, is this going to be a loser or is it not? And certainly we went through that a couple of times last week as well. I like those calls. I'm with you. I kind of like Carolina. I just don't. To me, it's more about the Seattle defense just completely falling off a cliff over these last few weeks. It really feels like that Germany game against Tampa Bay is when things started to flip for Seattle. The offensive line has taken a big step back. I do think the Seahawks win this game, but in staff picks, I think I went like 27-24 Seattle. I think this is a game where, assuming Foreman is active, I think the Panthers will be able to move the ball. And all season, this has been an underrated Carolina defense. So I don't think this is necessarily a walk in the park for Seattle. And look, the Rams put in a pretty good effort last week. To me, that they were really juiced up for that game. You could tell. I mean, I thought at one point Jalen Ramsey was like -500 to get ejected from that game. Like, he was fired up. Bobby Wagner played his best game of the year. So you do have to tip your cap to the Rams. But man, if you're Seattle, like, you should not have been in that position. That should not have taken, a last second game winning drive to beat this version of the Rams. So that alarmed me a little bit. I'll throw a few at you that maybe seem a little bit too high over at BetMGM. And hey, by the way, John, if you want your first wager risk-free, go over to BetMGM. You can go to BetMGM.com. You can use the BetMGM app. You can just plug in our promo code BETROTO, BETROTO. Your first wager is risk-free up to $1,000. Just a little note. Make sure you're using that. The 49ers, Brock Purdy, he is the quarterback now for the 49ers. The 49ers are at home. They get a Tampa Bay team that, yes, technically the Buccaneers did beat the New Orleans Saints. They probably should not have won that game. It was very, very ugly. They turned it over or punted on 7 of their 10 drives in that game. The offense looked as bad as it's looked really all season. The total is 37.5 in this game, and the 49ers are 3.5-point favorites. I get it, especially coming off of a win at home over the Dolphins, who are a better team than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They won that game fairly comfortably. So I understand the line. I actually deep down, I don't think it's too high, but it's Brock Purdy going up against Tom Brady. So it's a little strange seeing Tom Brady as a 3.5 point dog to Brock Purdy. That's what it comes down to for me.
No, that definitely checks out. Like if you see that, you look at the quarterbacks and you're just like, how? But it in a way, like I feel better about Brock Purdy given how he was used last week. Like the offense didn't go into a shell once he came in. He ended up with like 37 pass attempts. So that goes to show that Shanahan is willing to keep things rolling with him, and they seem about as high as you can be on a 7th round pick type of guy. But he's an experienced guy, not completely unlike Desmond Ritter, longtime starter at Iowa State, has a lot of reps, just knows what he's doing, can at least occupy that game manager role. Mm-hmm. And for the Bucs, I mean, they should have lost that game for a lot of reasons. I think that the Saints completely gave it back to them. I thought that punt call in the 4th quarter, about halfway through, was egregious, and they were not punished properly for it. And that comes down to the Saints finding a way to just be stupid, just running like a hurry up offense when you're trying to kill the clock. Like, what are you doing, Dennis Allen? You're in way over your head. Like, he'll be gone by Black Monday, I guess they call it, the day that they fire all the coaches. He'll be gone. That's an easy one. So shame on you, Saints. But I don't think that the Bucs, like, you can really take that comeback win and really like apply it and be like, okay, no, things are fixed now. They are not. Yeah. They got a short week. I don't know if Tom Brady has been able to get his hyperbaric chamber out to the Bay Area. He probably has one out there already, but that's a quick turnaround for old Tom. Mm-hmm. And the Niners defense is nasty, and the Bucs offense just makes no sense whatsoever. It's almost like a little bit akin to like the late stage Ben Roethlisberger, where they just want to get the ball out of his hands as quickly as possible because he simply does not trust that offensive line, and that just shrinks the field on themselves, and that creates a lot of problems when you're facing a defense as good as San Francisco.
Right. And I mean, like you said, Tom Brady's getting the ball out, I should say, faster than any quarterback in the league. They are far and away the worst rushing offense in the NFL. That worries me big time against this San Francisco defense. It's like, if you can't move the ball on the ground against New Orleans, I think they're going to run into a wall in San Francisco. And, in some ways, it's like you're putting the ball in the hands of Tom Brady, which is not a bad thing, but it's the K. Dotton 2-yard out, Chris Godwin 4-yard slant raid that we seem like we talk about every single week. And I don't know if you can get away with that against the San Francisco defense. And miraculously, by the way, John, this is the first time all season that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are underdogs.
Wow. It took all this time, and they've been really underwhelming that like basically this entire season. Right. So that is unreal that it's taken this long for them to be a dog, but I think it's correct in this case, even with Brock Purdy out there.
Yeah, I think it checks out. Very, very low total in this game as well, 37.5. Bucs team totals, 11-1 to the under this season. I think that probably happens again. We'll see what Brock Purdy's able to do against this Tampa Bay defense. I mean, the Buccaneers had some breakdowns in the first half of that game. You think about that Taysom Hill touchdown. I mean, just kind of a miscommunication in coverage. You saw Todd Bowles, talking to his guys on the sideline, just like, what are you doing? Some injuries in that Tampa Bay secondary that we'll be monitoring as well. But overall, I came away encouraged by what I saw from Brock Purdy, especially considering he went into that game not expecting to play, right? It's not like he had a week to prep for the Miami Dolphins. It's like you're going in cold after Jimmy G goes down with a crushing injury. So I think all things considered, if you're the 49ers, it's like, I don't love that they're still like 12-1 to win the Super Bowl. Like, to me, that upside, I don't know if that's still there. But week to week, I still think this could be a dangerous team. Like, there's definitely a drop from Garoppolo to Purdy, but I overall, I was encouraged by him being like slightly more than a game manager, right? Like, this isn't like when the Titans went to Malik Willis for a couple weeks and it was like, we are doing everything we can to take the ball out of your hands. Like, San Francisco's not going to do that. Like, I think they're still, for the most part, they're going to run their offense like 90% like they would have with Garoppolo.
Yeah, Shanny does not care. He thinks that system is king, and rarely does he get proven completely wrong. Like, I feel like his blood pressure doesn't rise at all, whether it's Jimmy Garoppolo under center or Nick Mullins or CJ Beathard. So I think Purdy, that they seem to love him. The locker room, everyone was just like, yeah, Brock Purdy, like, kind of the guy. So It feels like there's almost a galvanization going on around old Purdy here as we hit the stretch run. And, this is an Niners team that's come a long way. Like they're not going to quit on this just because Jimmy G is out. So again, I agree with your assessment that this probably isn't a Super Bowl team anymore, but they are still very dangerous. And I think that absolutely emphatically that they are better than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
One more note, by the way, on Tom Brady. This will be the first time since 2006 that Tom Brady is an underdog against a rookie quarterback. The last time that happened, Vince Young and the Tennessee Titans back in 2006. The Patriots won that game 40-23. So completely different context. I mean, that was 16 years ago. The distant future are we in now? But, something to monitor nonetheless. The other game I'll throw out there, maybe a little high. Should the Buffalo Bills be 10-point favorites, John, against the New York Jets?
I go back and forth on this one, but I can certainly see the argument for that line being too high. The Bills, obviously they take care of business last Thursday against the Patriots, but I don't think that they've necessarily been playing their A game of late. I didn't think that they brought their A game to Detroit with them. The Cleveland game was just kind of a weird little outlier with all the travel weirdness and neutral site type of stuff. But I do feel like more than anything, this could, and it hurts me to say this because I love the story and I enjoy his stylings, but the Mike White, it's going to run out at some point. And I believe last year was the last that we saw from him until the Bears game this year. And I believe he threw 4 interceptions in that game against Buffalo.
He did.
I worry that something very similar like that could happen. And if he even goes to 2 or 3 picks, I think that's giving the Bills way too many opportunities. So if Josh Allen can kind of fix his turnover issues that he had that first time around, and they are at home, then I think the Bills can cover. But I'm kind of just, if I'm on the Bills on this spread, I'm counting on Mike White having a meltdown. But if he doesn't, then this game becomes a little bit closer because I do believe that defense for the Jets will still be able to give Buffalo a little bit of trouble.
At 10, this is a stay away for me. I had it at 9 when I wrote up my picks earlier this week, and I feel like this is like a 27-17 type of game for Buffalo. I like the Bills to win. Obviously, the Jets have beat them once this season. That was with Zach Wilson, and that was the game where it felt like things were really starting to unravel for Buffalo. 2 picks for Josh Allen. That's when he suffered the elbow injury. But man, Buffalo to me kind of felt like they took their foot off the gas last week against New England. I think they could have run that score up a little bit more if they wanted to. But Josh Allen, that was, even though the Bills, I think you're right, it's been like 6 weeks since they've had one of those whoa, this team is unstoppable type of games. And we should note Von Miller's not coming back. He's not coming back this week. He's not coming back at all this season. That is a big hit for that defense. But last week against New England, I mean, Josh Allen had 2 or 3 vintage Josh Allen type of throws. So I think that elbow is fine.
Yes, and that's super encouraging for them now and heading down the stretch, because if he didn't show that, that classic Josh Allen ability, then I think that you are all of a sudden very worried about the Bills' long-term chances this season.
All right, let's go to the other side. Which lines are looking a little low to you, John?
All right, so the ones that were too low, we were just talking about the Niners. I do feel like the Niners are in good shape here despite the quarterback situation. I feel like the Bengals, their line is a little bit small and it's shrinking. I've noticed when we both wrote ours, you probably had Bengals at 6, maybe even 6.5. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, now we're looking at 5.5, and the prevailing narratives that I've seen in support of the Browns don't really make sense to me, or just don't carry water. Okay, Joe Burrow has historically struggled against the Browns. Do you want to bet on that continuing? Do you really want to bet on Joe Burrow?
He's literally never beat the Browns.
Having the Cleveland Browns as his kryptonite, I think not. I think that gets corrected here. I don't think that you run into the risk of the Bengals having the proverbial letdown game after a big win, because this is the Browns, and this is a Browns team that embarrassed them on national TV on Halloween on that Monday night game. So that's definitely in their thoughts when they're looking ahead to this game. And then, rounding it out, Watson looked terrible last week, and if they weren't playing the Texans, who knows if they even if that performance beats any other team. So,
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
I love the Bengals in this spot. I think that they're starting to turn it on, and I think that you could argue they might be the most dangerous team in the NFL right now. So
Yes.
I think that continues this week. I would take them. I would take an alt spread up to 9.5 on the Bengals. I really love them in this spot.
Joe Burrow has been a great cold weather quarterback. He's been a great kind of later in the season quarterback. Obviously, those things are correlated. 10-1 ATS in games where the temperature is 50 degrees or lower. It is projected to be exactly 40 degrees in Cincinnati, Ohio at noon on Sunday. So, yeah, I mean, part of it is the Bengals are rolling right now. Their last loss came against this Browns team in that bizarre primetime game. It was right after they lost Jamar Chase, and that was an all-timer for me. I'm like, right away, I'm like, Bengals are not winning this game. They just don't have it. And since then they've just been completely rolling. I think their win last week against the Chiefs, that might be the single most impressive win of the season, in a game that it felt like, if you're watching that one live, which I'm sure you were, that was like a zero margin for error type of game. It was like whichever team has the crucial turnover, and it ended up being that Kelsey fumble, that's what's going to decide it, because you kind of felt like both teams, when they get the ball, they're going to score. And in the first half, the Bengals had that weird red zone possession where fourth down, they run that horrific jet sweep, gets blown up, and to be able to kind of survive that, thought the defense played just well enough, and the way that they were able to control the clock in that game was so impressive. And Burrow's numbers, 2 touchdowns, I think he was around like 280 yards. Fine. It wasn't one of those games where you're like, wow, Joe Burrow, just crazy numbers, but it was a Joe Burrow moxie game, if you will. Like, that was a Tom Brady-esque performance, I felt, from Joe Burrow. Like, he's not doing the, Mahomes had a couple insane throws, where he's stepping up in the pocket, launching it deep to MVS. Joe Burrow doesn't have those Josh Allen tiptoeing the sideline, throw across the body plays, but everything was just pinpoint accuracy. And he should have had 3 touchdowns, by the way, if Tyler Boyd hauls in that easy catch.
Yeah, that was
a walk-in
tough.
touchdown. So, I mean, that was one of the most impressive games of Burrow's career. I'm not breaking any news here, but I don't think this is a letdown spot. And like you said, as much as I like the Bengals, the reason I like this game even more is I don't trust the Browns. Like, how is this number moving in favor of Cleveland? You laid it out perfectly. I think I will hear the argument that they maybe would have beat the Broncos last week. I think if they play that same game, they lose to every other team in the league. Not other teams are not handing you, a fumble recovery at the 5-yard line that you can literally walk into the end zone and you get the pick six, you get the special teams touchdown. Like, the Browns offense looked awful in that game. Deshaun Watson looked terrible in that game. We talked about his yardage prop last week. That was probably my best bet of the entire week. Was I was on Prize Picks. I was on the DK Sportsbook, the BetMGM Sportsbook. We'll edit that in post. I was on the BetMGM Sportsbook, hammering the under. It was like 240 was his yardage. I mean, I thought he had no chance to go past that. And honestly, my expectations for Watson were low last week. They're even lower after that game. And long term, I obviously he's going to be a better quarterback than Jacoby Brissett. I don't think anybody's really arguing that, but I didn't see anything last week that suggests that it's going to be fixed over the course of 7 days against a vastly better opponent.
No. So, I mean, it almost feels so right on the Bengals that I'm like, as we talk this out, it's like, maybe, but nope, sticking to it. I think the Browns are cooked in this spot. Maybe they got the Ravens coming up next week, and I think that maybe Watson will be in a little bit better shape for that one. But in this spot against Cincinnati on the road, no, give me the Bengals all day.
I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, John, but we might have our first mutual lock of the week. We'll see when we get to the end of this pod, but I'm telling you, I feel pretty good about the Cincinnati Bengals. One that I'm looking at, the Dallas Cowboys, 17.5 is that a little too low at home against Houston?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking 21.5 before I'm even thinking about the Texans, but actually, I'm only half joking.
Well, right, and I'm joking as well. So the last 10 home teams to be favored by at least 16.5 points went 7-3 ATS and 9-1 straight up. I think the Rams dropped a game to the Jets a year or two ago. That was the lone outlier in terms of the straight up loss, but 7-3 ATS in these spots at home. So I think we had this one at 16 or 16.5 in staff picks. I went with Dallas. You never feel great about taking a spread that's this high, but I just think Dallas is, I said it to you last week, like they are they're that team that I think is so perfectly built, excuse me, to blow teams out. And we saw it against the Colts because of that defense. I think they're a defense that creates more, havoc plays than just about any other. And look, they're not going to put up 30 plus points in the fourth quarter 2 weeks in a row, but I don't even think Dallas has to play that well. And I think they cover this pretty easily, right? I think they could play a B- game on offense, and I think still win this game by 20 points. I mean, we almost saw it last week. I mean, Cleveland played like a D+ game on offense and still beat them by 2 scores.
Right. So, you really, the only thing that you get concerned about is like the Cowboys being disinterested. That's really the only way in which they don't cover this number, because if they play, like you said, even a B- game, they should take care of business. Like the Texans are just completely unserious as an NFL team. Like what they're putting out there right now, the little quarterback carousel between Kyle Allen and Davis Mills. I always feel bad for Davis Mills coming into this game. It's like, okay, you're now the guy that gets to get just knocked around by Micah Parsons and company this week. Like I'd be like, my shoulder's acting up a little bit. Well, how about Kyle take this one and I'll be back next week? Like it's going to be a bloodbath in that backfield. And so even though the number is gigantic, like you said, the history suggests that those big favorites can cover these numbers, and it all boils down to how bad the underdog is. And Texans are really one of the worst teams we've seen in recent years. So that week 1 tie feels like an eternity ago. It's been a while since things have felt that good for Houston.
Well, they did beat the Jaguars, so that is like the ultimate black mark on the Jags resume for this season. I mean, man, I've been doing a lot of work on the playoff machine this week, for the Jags and the Packers. I mean, the Jags are done at this point, but Green Bay, they could still make some things happen. We'll have to track that. If they could find a way to beat Miami on Christmas Day, things are going to get interesting. But the Jags, I mean, that loss to the Colts, that loss to Houston, like those are the two where it's like, if you could have those back, things could get a little interesting in the AFC South. Anything else here that stands out to you as a little bit low? I know you were kind of zeroing in on that Jags Titans game, which is currently sitting at Titans -4. This game is in Nashville.
Yeah, so that's a tricky one. Part of me thinks that of course the Titans cover this, but that we talked about it on the Monkey Knife Fight show earlier. Like you said it well. Like the Titans, even when they win, they don't really blow you out. So trusting them with more than a field goal can be a little bit dicey. We're a week removed from the Jags having arrived, or at least I thought so. But last week's game brought that crashing back to earth. I feel like you're the more credible source on this one, but as it stands, I feel like it's a little bit too low of a number in favor of the Titans. I'd be comfortable with them, closer to 5 even.
With the Titans, I think part of this is like the Jags offensively, at least, despite games like last week, a lot of the advanced metrics still point to this being closer to like a league average team as opposed to a team that's several games below 500. There are some injuries that we're keeping an eye on in Tennessee as well. I mean, Treylon Burks was basically knocked out cold last week. Who knows if he'll be available? I would guess probably not. Jeffrey Simmons has been banged up for a lot of the year. He's still battling an ankle injury, did not practice on Thursday. Without him, that changes things for that defense. But yeah, I mean, this is not a great spot for the Jags. They haven't won in Tennessee since 2013. I mean, we're going back to was that like the Cecil Shorts days? That was right. I think that was like immediately following the Toby Gerhart era. Might have been right in the heart of it. So yeah, it's been a long time. And this is one of those games where like traditionally you would say the Titans have a huge coaching advantage, and they definitely do. I mean, Mike Vrabel is a better coach than Doug Peterson. I do think the coaching gap has been narrowed significantly with the job that Peterson's done this year. But this is the type of game where I think Tennessee is now definitively proven that they maybe can't hang with the big dogs. That was kind of the big question coming into last week against the Eagles was, look, the Titans have lost all of the games against teams that are equal or better to them this year, and they've won all the games against teams that are worse than them. And to me, the Jaguars qualify as a team that is definitely worse than Tennessee. And, the other thing with this too is Trevor Lawrence, I feel like the rest of the season, we're kind of playing with house money because he didn't tear his ACL last week. I was 100% sure he did. He somehow returned to that game. He ended up on the injury report with a toe injury. Still limited, these last couple of days. It's not a guarantee that Lawrence plays in this game. I think he does. But if he doesn't, I mean, that is the ultimate trump card for Tennessee. So I think the Jags give him a game. I don't think this is another like 40-14 situation like last week, but that's due in large part to the fact that, as you alluded to, the Titans just don't blow teams out. So I think we get something like, I don't know, 24-17 Titans.
Okay. They're still covering at that point, but yeah, I don't think that this becomes a romp, but yeah, that one definitely stuck out to me a little bit as we were going through and trying to identify those lines that seem a little low.
Lawrence in his career, by the way, 0-5 ATS against the Titans and the Texans, which is just, that's not a stat. Hopefully that changes at some point, but I understand that the Tennessee part of that, not so much on the Houston side. All right, we'll get into the rest of week 14 on the other side here, but John, I made a terrible lapse in judgment last week. I jumped on Seattle last second. In staff picks, I actually took the Steelers as my best bet. That paid off. They win in Atlanta. For some reason, I opted to go against my conscience and take Seattle. That did not come through, but you're back on the right side of these best bets. You hit yours 49ers -3.5 against Miami.
Yes. Felt great about that one. And, the funny thing about you taking Seattle is that you had laid out this amazing case about be wary of anyone that has just come into close contact with the Las Vegas Raiders. And you went against your own numbers, man. It hurt me to see that.
You're right, but the stat was that those teams were, I think they were like 1-10 straight up after playing the Raiders. Yeah. So they did win the game. I didn't look into the ATS stuff. I should have looked deeper. It was one of those games where I was picking against the Rams. I wasn't picking Seattle, and that's where you get into some danger. So I suppose, John, the read falls on me this week solo.
All right, I surrender it unto you, sir.
All right. Kick off week 14 of the NFL season with the king of sportsbooks. Sign up with BetMGM using bonus code BETROTO. That's BETROTO. And your first wager is risk-free up to $1,000. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, Michigan, Mississippi, Nevada, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Puerto Rico, Tennessee, Virginia, Washington, D.C., West Virginia, Wyoming, or Ontario only. Must be 21 years or older to wager, 19 or older in Ontario. This is a new customer offer. All promotions are subject to qualification and eligibility requirements. Rewards are issued as non-withdrawable free bets or site credit. Free bets expire 7 days from issuance. This excludes Michigan disassociated persons. Please, we're begging you, gamble responsibly. Do you have a gambling problem? Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-522-4700 in Colorado, D.C., Kansas, Louisiana, Nevada, Wyoming, or Virginia. Call 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help in Michigan, 1-800-GAMBLER in Indiana, Maryland, New Jersey, or West Virginia, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Call or text the Tennessee Red Line at 800-889-9789 in Tennessee, or call 1-888-777-9696 in Mississippi. In Ontario, if you have questions or concerns about your gambling or the gambling of someone close to you, please contact Connects Ontario at 1-866-531-2600 to speak to an advisor free of charge. Sports betting is void in Georgia, Hawaii, Ohio, and Utah, and other states where prohibited. Promotional offers not available in Nevada and New York. Good.
Bang up job.
Thanks.
Once again.
It felt good. I've had to read this way too many times this year. But look, I'm feeling good about this week's lock. I can't say that every week. I'll put it out there. This week's going to be the lock of the year, not just the lock of the week.
Wow. Okay. All right. So that's, the gauntlet is being thrown here, folks. So, listen up.
All right, I just had a knock at the door, so it's my turn to temporarily pause the pod and let whoever is at my door in. But I will be right back, John.
Okay, very good. So to our dear live viewers, we'll keep talking here. We'll keep chatting. Just looking at some trends from around the league. So if you want to know some of the teams that are the worst against the spread on the road this year, Jacksonville, 1-5. We got Philly, 1-4. We got the Dolphins, 1-4-1 against the spread on the road. We've got the Rams 1-3-1 on the road as well. If we're looking ahead to teams that are struggling at home, the worst team against the spread at home this year, the Baltimore Ravens, 0-5-1. So I was giving the good people here, Nick, some ATS standings numbers here. I hit some of the road teams that are struggling there, and then the number one bad team at home, as I was privy to a few weeks ago, the Ravens, 0-5-1, have yet to cover a spread at home. Pathetic.
All right, I appreciate you filling there. That was an unexpected visitor. They got to know better. Like, we're doing this pod every week. Maybe I need to put a sign up on the door. Like, I'll be back in an hour.
On the air, just like at the Roto office.
All right, but we'll get back to it, John. Let's see what games have we not touched on. I do love the way that we attack these, because we get past the read and it feels like we've knocked out most of the games. But let's go to Vikings Lions.
Yes.
We got the Lions now as 1.5 point favorites at home. That line is actually down a little bit. Like, this is a strange situation, because it opened at, I believe, Minnesota 2.5, and over the course of the last 4 days went all the way to the other side. It was Lions 2.5, now down to 1.5. And this is not a situation where we're talking about like the look ahead line from back in September. We saw some significant line movement here just over the course of these last few days, but looks like it settled at 1.5. I'm okay with that. I mean, I know it's a little bit counterintuitive to see a 10-2 team like Minnesota as an underdog here, but they are on the road. And as we continue to touch on all year, John, that this is a 10-2 team that a lot of the metrics suggest is nowhere close to that level.
Right. Yeah. And there's a lot that goes into, leading us to that point. It's led a lot of people to call them fraudulent. I think that's fair to an extent. I still wouldn't love to be playing against the Vikings in January, but there's some flaws there. And I think that, just viscerally, you see a 5-7 team favored against a 10-2 team. And it's like, what, is the quarterback on the other team hurt? What's going on there? But the Lions have just played well over the last month. Like, it doesn't feel like a flash in the pan the way that September's run went, even though the record didn't suggest that things were going great in Detroit. They were playing really fun, exciting, close games every week early on in the season, including a close one against Minnesota. And I think that your knee-jerk reaction, and it'll be fascinating to see kind of where the money ends up landing on this one, because the line has danced around. I think it got as high as maybe Detroit -2, -2.5, but not now. Like you said, it's creeping back down. But when a line doesn't make sense, I just assume that it makes perfect sense. And so with that in mind, I think the Lions cover this one. I think that they win outright and they cover this number. I'm willing to get hurt again by Dan Campbell.
I don't have a super strong lean here. I understand why the Lions are favored. They probably should have won at Minnesota back in, I think that was week 3 or week 4. That was kind of the peak of Dan Campbell, poor clock management late in that game. There were some ill-advised punts. So I do think, that there is a coach advantage here for Minnesota. I do think these teams, on a neutral, are these teams really any different? I think that's kind of what the line all week has been implying, that even though Minnesota is the much better team, they're running away with the NFC North. I think a lot of the odds makers see these teams as pretty equal when you power rate them. And, I think we don't really trust either defense. We know for a fact that the Detroit defense is not good, but I think Minnesota's defense has kind of slipped a little bit these last few weeks. And, Minnesota's now what? Are they, I think, 9-0 in one-score games this year, games of 8 points or less. They've won literally every single one. They've been blown out twice, and then they beat Green Bay in week 1 by multiple scores. But to me, it sometimes you have teams like this and you say, man, that team, they just find ways to win. You got to give them credit. The Vikings, it feels like they find ways not to lose, or their opponents find ways to lose. And that was the case again last week against the Jets, where, they go 1 of 6, inside the 5-yard line, can't convert that late one. Braxton Berrios basically drops a 4th down catch that probably wins the game for the Jets. And even after that, they get another chance, and Mike White ends up throwing a pick. So I understand the logic, but what scares me away here is that it feels like everybody's on the Lions.
Yeah. I mean, that's always scary when there's a market that's basically in lockstep. That's never a comforting feeling, really. It makes you feel the opposite. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to the Vikings and their close game ways, like the drill tweet, you simply do not have to hand it to them. He was not talking about the Minnesota Vikings, though. He was talking about some other group that we don't care for. But yeah, I'm going to stick with the Lions here, but man, like I don't know. This is one of the more interesting like spreads of the entire season in my mind, and I really I want all the distraction from a Ravens Steelers game on Sunday, and I think that this will provide some of it.
Yeah, no, I'm willing to just kind of default to the home team here if that's kind of the approach you want to take with this game. And the line is to the point where you're not like, it's not at a key number. You're not worried about losing by 3 or anything like that. It's just basically which team do you feel better about. And Detroit has played really good football, I think, for 5-6 weeks in a row now. This was a 1-6 team not that long ago, and it does feel to me that if they had hung on and beat the Bills on Thanksgiving, the narrative would be completely different. I think they lost too much credit for ultimately losing a game that they probably should have won. Like they went toe to toe with the Buffalo Bills for 58 minutes.
Yeah, they really did. So that they'll get in the mud with anybody, and I don't know how muddy the Vikings really like to get.
Probably not that muddy. Ultimately, I think they kind of have the reputation as a paper tiger type of team. And by the way, in my Beating the Book article, I laid this out. I mean, the Vikings quite literally might be the worst 10-2 team of all time. Like I ran a query on StatHead, just kind of taking a look at teams with that win percentage. What kind of point differential are you looking at? They are the worst team in the database to have a win percentage of at least 83. And that they have the lowest point differential, I guess is one way to put it, of any of those teams. So, the numbers back up. I think that notion that Minnesota is not quite as good as their record. I did discover in that research, by the way, that 07 Pats team that went undefeated, plus 315 during the regular season. They were plus 315 in 16 games. That's an average margin of 19.6 points per game.
I mean, they really were just... It'd be hilarious, like when, because I think it wasn't pre-Sunday ticket or anything, but, we weren't able to go to Buffalo Wild Wings as sophomores in high school or whatever, and like be able to like see all the action. So it would just be, you see the Patriots score on the bottom of whatever game you're watching, you're like, oh my God, like they are like setting new records just like every week, just laying complete waste to everybody. Did they win the Super Bowl that year though?
I don't believe they did.
What a disappointment. That sucks.
Yeah, just kind of erased everything, I guess is kind of how you have to look at it. Yeah. Let's go to Eagles Giants. This is a nice little juicy divisional matchup. Eagles on the road, coming in red hot, of course, after decimating the Tennessee Titans last week. I don't know what else we need to see from the Eagles, man. I'm fully ready to dive in. I know there are still some that are kind of just feel like you get a general skeptical vibe of the Eagles. Like people don't want to talk about them in quite the same context as teams like the Chiefs and the Bills. I'm absolutely ready to go there. I think this is a team that when they're healthy, especially on defense, when Jordan Davis and Gardner Johnson are healthy, like there are just very few flaws. And I guess if the argument is you need to see it from Jalen Hurts in the playoffs, I can't really argue against that. But this team is just loaded, man. It's a loaded roster. They're well coached. Hurts is playing at an extremely high level. I think they're in a good spot here on the road. With that said, the Giants are kind of like the Titans in a lot of ways. We've seen them kind of be able to stay close with teams that maybe have a pretty big talent advantage. So I don't necessarily see this being a repeat of last week, where the Eagles have that game locked up by halftime, but we're seeing this line, move a little bit in favor of the Eagles. Are up to 7.5 point favorites on the road.
Yeah. I mean, and it makes sense. The Eagles have been amazing all year. Like you said, like among the expected number one seeds, that they don't feel like they're getting the classic amount of credit. I think, like you said, a lot of that has to do with Hurts and his need to prove it at the NFL level. In January, certainly didn't show it against the Bucs last year, but that's last year. He's obviously come a very long way, and they also did not have AJ Brown. Now they do. And maybe that's why John Robinson got fired this week. Who knows?
I think it was.
Just the sheer dunking that AJ Brown did put on Tennessee was just like, you know what, pal, like you're freaking out. But the way I'm betting this game, Giants, they're not very good, but they can just ugly things up. They can muck it up, and they're at home. They're 5-2 at home against the spread. The Eagles have not been good on the road against the spread. They're 1-4. Again, like I worry that maybe I'm putting too much weight on like that Indianapolis game, but I could just see them not necessarily sleepwalking, but getting into a bit of a bar fight that they didn't want to.
Yeah, it potential letdown spot certainly for Philadelphia. Again, going on the road. I think this is a game that ideally the Giants, they want this game to be played probably in the low 20s. I think if the Eagles are scoring 25 or more points, they probably win this game relatively easily. But total sitting at 44.5. So we're looking at an implied score of 26 to 18.5. I think that would be scoregami. But if they could keep this low scoring, I think that definitely benefits the New York Giants. So we'll see if they can actually do that against this high-powered Eagles offense. But Giants, by the way, 17-2 to the under in their last 19 home games. So even with some pretty rough rosters this year and certainly last year, that they have been able to at least contain opponents defensively at home.
Yes. So and if that is the case, then I think the Eagles are a little bit in trouble. Like, again, we're not expecting the Giants to score a ton here, but if they can at least just slow this Eagles attack, I'm worried about that because I don't think the corner personnel is at full strength right now. So that's potentially a huge issue. But if the wind is whipping there in East Rutherford, maybe Jalen Hurts doesn't be able or can't cut through it the same way. And, then it's anyone's game. So, again, I'm not taking the Giants to win or anything, but I do like them to cover, all things considered.
Yeah, you mentioned Adoree Jackson will not play in this game. Leonard Williams got dinged up last week. He did not practice on Thursday, and even Saquon was limited on Thursday as well. So maybe some reason that line ticked up a little bit in favor of the Eagles. Let's go to your Ravens. The Tyler Huntley Baltimore Ravens on the road at the Steelers. They are 2-point dogs over at BetMGM as of right now. This line, pre-Lamar Jackson injury, if you look a little over a week ago, this was Ravens -4.5. So a pretty major reversal here. I think part of it is obviously the Jackson injury. That's number one. Number two, the Steelers are playing a hell of a lot better these last few weeks, and then getting TJ Watt back. You know all the stats, the basically the on-off court stats with TJ Watt are extremely friendly. And I think the other thing is, we only got 11 snaps from Lamar Jackson last week. So who knows? Maybe it was just a couple bad series and they figure it out. And they end up scoring more than 10 points on that Denver defense. But things did not look great for Lamar Jackson. A couple quick punts before he got hurt. And, you go back 2 weeks ago, they have that crushing loss to Jacksonville. The week before that, a kind of an eerily similar game against Carolina to what we saw this past Sunday against Denver. So, again, obviously going from Lamar to Tyler Huntley is the main factor here. But I also think the general struggles of this Ravens offense are top of mind.
Yes, I would not have taken at full strength the Ravens to cover 4.5 on the road against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, like you said, they are playing better. You have a guy in Tyler Huntley. You have to run just an inherently limited playbook. We saw this last year, and the Ravens were competitive with Huntley, but they just wouldn't win those games. There's some really now that this is happening again, I'm having these flashbacks of the Ravens just doing these really boneheaded 2-point conversion plays. I didn't even hate the decision. Yep, I was front and center with our guy Chris Owen watching that. But every time they'd go for 2, and I'd be like, nice. And then every time they'd line up and just do a sprint right and just hope that Mark Andrews can catch it right at the pylon. It's you are not leaving yourself enough margin for error. And after the fourth time, Greg Roman still never learned his lesson. And unfortunately, he's out of the running at Stanford. So we can't even jettison him that way. It's very disappointing. But bottom line here, I don't think this is a good spot for the Ravens. And with the number being as low as it is, Steelers can definitely win this one by a field goal. So I'll be shocked if the Ravens win. I'll be shocked if they cover. I is a strong word, but I back the Steelers in this spot against my poor guys.
Yeah, I also something the Steelers in this game. You phrased it shockingly well. I think the Steelers do win this game at home. I think it's another kind of ugly Like there's like 4 drives that you think are going to end in touchdowns, and then they end up kicking like a 24-yard field goal. That's been the Steelers' MO all season. But yeah, I think they win a really ugly, low-scoring game, and I think that's what we've come to expect for the Baltimore Ravens. And with Tyler Huntley, I think that becomes even more likely. By the way, the total in this game, the lowest of the week, 36.5. I mean, that's one of the lowest totals of the whole year.
Yeah, and I still like the under. Like I'm not even blinking. It's like, no, there's just not going to be points on it. Unless, I mean, Huntley did turn it over a couple times last week. If Pittsburgh turns those into points, then it's obviously a different story. But I don't think either of these offenses are going to get us to that number. It would have to be a little bit of defensive magic as well.
Yeah, we'll see if the Ravens pull out the jet sweep pass interception play. I think that one will probably be after last week.
Do you know that James Prochet had never thrown a pass in a game in high school or college?
Had he ever thrown a football before, like at all?
Honestly, not the worst looking throw I've ever seen. It was just the worst. It was about the worst decision I've ever seen, especially from a non-quarterback. It harkened back memories to a classic Ed Reed moment where the Jets rolled Lamont Jordan out on a very similar look. And the NFL, if you watch the NFL films, Herm's like, no. And then he throws it, and then Ed Reed's 106 yards back the other way. And that game changed dramatically after that moment. So, I don't fault James Prochet so much, but I do fault the decision. I also fault the play call. I mean, come on, what is that?
Right. One more note on TJ Watt, by the way. Since TJ Watt entered the NFL, the Steelers are 55, 25, and 2 straight up in games where TJ Watt plays. They are 1-10 straight up without TJ Watt. So that absolutely passes the eye test.
It's a little something I like to call defensive end wins with a Z. And it's real.
Yeah, a lot of people don't like that stat, but it is very, very real. All right, we got a few more games to zip through. Chiefs, 9.5-point favorites on the road at Denver. It's kind of right on the borderline. If this one gets to 10, maybe I think twice about it, but I will take the Chiefs, who are leading the league in pretty much every offensive metric, especially passing, yards per play, yards per drive, things like that. Obviously the Broncos defense is really good. We know that. I think that narrative has finally come to light, despite the offense, putting them in horrific situations week after week. But I like the Chiefs here. I do.
I'm on the Broncos.
Whoa!
Don't make me like say a whole lot as to why. Okay. Anytime I back the Broncos, it never feels good, but like it is right some of the times. So I mean, like again, 9.5 points at home. I'm just trusting the defense and closing my eyes.
Yeah, I mean they're 4-7 ATS somehow on the year, which I mean having 4 wins against the spread with that offensive output is impressive. I mean, this is on pace to be literally one of the worst offenses in NFL history, especially in modern times. I don't have much else to say about that game. We can move on. Panthers, Seahawks. Seattle, 4-point favorites at home. We talked a little bit about this one in the open. We both like the Panthers here to cover. I like Seattle to win. I will reiterate that, but I think the Seahawks we're putting them in the Charger zone, I think, for the rest of the season. Like they're going to play those games where even if they're the better team, even if they have the better quarterback, even if they're better coached, they have proven pretty definitively to me over the last 3 weeks that, as you said earlier, they will get into the mud with anybody.
Yeah, they just play to the level of whoever's lined up against them. Yep. It's just going to be a weird game no matter what. So yes, very well said. This is they have entered the Charger zone, trademark. Your thoughts on the 2 night games, one of which actually includes the Chargers?
Yeah, what a good segue. I was hoping that's where we were going. Dolphins, Chargers. Dolphins 3.5-point favorites on the road. I will say, John, I was considering putting this into the is this line too high pile because the Dolphins did not look good last week, albeit against a very good 49ers defense. This is not a good Chargers defense, but that defense is being dragged down in particular by one of the worst run defenses in recent memory. They are the worst run defense in terms of yards per carry for the second straight year. The question is, can the Dolphins exploit that? Because they could not run the ball last week. They could not run the ball against the Houston Texans. So do they make a point to target that Chargers run defense, or do they kind of do what they do best and try to win this game through the air?
So they might not have a choice. I think between Tua's ankle injury and, what we saw from what they have as far as the offensive line is concerned right now with all the injuries, you can't come into this with a game plan where you have a lot of 5 and 7 step drops for Tua. Like either the ball has to get out of his hands very quickly or that pass rush gets to him, or, you're in deep trouble. Like I just think that it's going to be a lot of quick game and a lot of running the ball. So, if you're a Jeff Wilson haver or even a Raheem Mostert haver, then I think that this is a pretty good spot for them. But I think even if they're having success on the ground, I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing or a winning strategy for the Dolphins in this spot. So trusting them to cover more than a field goal on the road, even against a team like the Chargers, it's a bit much for me. So I'm actually pretty strongly on the Chargers. Not best bet territory, but I like the Chargers a good bit in this spot.
I took the Dolphins in staff picks. I think I had it at like 33-28 Miami. This is the second highest total of the week. It's sitting at 51.5, actually tied now with Vikings Lions, which is down from 52.5. But I think we see points. That's for sure. I don't really trust this Miami defense either. And the Chargers, by the way, I mean, they're 29th in pressure rate. So I think your argument about Tua, like they don't want to get him hit. He took some huge hits late in that game against San Francisco. That's been a recurring unfortunate theme for him all year. But I don't know that the Chargers without Bosa are really capable of rattling Tua in the same ways that the 49ers were. But fun game. I mean, 2 weeks in a row, we get really fun games involving the Miami Dolphins. And Jalen Waddle, by the way, need to keep an eye on him. He's been limited by a fibula injury all week, which, not a doctor, but doesn't sound great. I mean, it's not like you can't strain your fibula. It's like it's a bone. It's either injured or it's not. So I would not be surprised if they're being a little bit cagey about where he's at this juncture in the week. Let's go to Monday Night Football. Then we'll get into our parlays and the teaser of the week. Patriots 1.5 point favorites on the road at the Arizona Cardinals, who are coming off of a bye.
So the Cardinals basically have a negative home field advantage. They just they don't win there straight up. And that against the spread, probably a little bit better, but even still, I'm just very skeptical of this Arizona team. I don't think that they're fully healthy, even coming off the bye. And I think the Patriots, they're fine with just going in there and getting an ugly win. So I think that this is a rather low scoring game. I know that the Patriots, they got kind of put back in their place, but by the Bills. What we saw from them on Thanksgiving, where the offense actually looked pretty good, that's going to end up being a huge aberration on the season. Like I just don't think that that's happening again. Mac Jones having his little hissy fit meltdown on the sidelines with Matt Patricia. Like it's like there's like a great Family Guy vignette where like they have Maggie and Jake Gyllenhaal, and they're both like just going back and forth about how much each of them suck. And then the dad comes in and he's like, kids, you're both just awful. That's basically what the Patricia Mac Jones spat looked like to me. So even with all that said, the Patriots just like they're better coached for the most part, and they don't have to play a finesse style. They can just go in there and get it done against a team that just is bad at home in front of their home fans. So give me the Patriots. I don't love it. I hope to be, distracted during that game on Monday night. I hope there's something more fun to do, but that's where I'm at with it.
I'm going the other way on this one. I know it's against my better judgment. The coaching edge here is probably the biggest advantage that the Patriots have at this point, but we're going to see DeAndre Hopkins and Hollywood Brown together for the first time this season. I'm at least willing to give that offense the benefit of the doubt in that regard. I think that could spark something. It is a good New England secondary, that's for sure. But we've also seen the New England defense struggle against mobile quarterbacks this season. I mean, they're 0-3 straight up against Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Justin Fields. That Pats defense allowed 70 combined points to Baltimore and Chicago. Baltimore especially, like that is an offense that has not been doing that very often of late. And obviously Chicago hasn't looked all that great either. So there is something to having a quarterback who can move and having, the two best receivers in this game on the Arizona side. So this is kind of my sticking my neck out a little bit pick of the week is I will take the Arizona Cardinals to win this game straight up.
Okay. Good point there. And yeah, with Hopkins and Brown both being out there for the first time together, that's definitely interesting. Kyler likely being a little bit closer to 100% this time around, that's huge for him. He does not play well when he's been on the injury report the previous week.
Yeah. Very true. Yeah, he's a guy, if he's like even at 90%, it feels like you do see a pretty major drop off. And who knows, maybe the Cardinals want Cliff Kingsbury fired, but this feels like a game where if you come in and you get smacked around at home by the Pats, I think that seat is going to get about as hot as it possibly could. Let's get to the parlay and the teaser of the week, John. I'll let you go first. What is your first parlay?
Okay, so I'm running back the afternoon delight parlay because it was delightful last week. So we're gonna run it back. These are just spreads, but I got Broncos against the spread, Panthers against the spread, and 49ers against the spread. So all those, basically even money. Broncos plus 9.5. We got the Panthers plus 4, Niners minus 3.5. If all that hits, that's plus 596. And if you want to add on to that, it's no longer classically the afternoon delight parlay. But if you add the Patriots money line, that goes to plus 1152.
Ooh, I like it. Kind of like the weekend extender parlay, throwing in the Monday night game. I like that a lot. I think to me, I think I'm most worried about the Broncos in that situation.
Sure.
But I like your logic there. And look, if you add the Pats and you're getting into the quad digits, I'm not going to fault you there. I'm going to throw out a 4-team money line parlay. I'm going to involve the Eagles. So they got to beat the Giants. The Bengals, they need to win at home against Cleveland. The Chiefs, they just got to beat the Broncos. And the Buffalo Bills need to beat the Jets. This gets you to plus 195. So we're not going for broke here. But I feel good about those 4 teams.
Yeah, I mean you're basically getting 2-1 with for the best teams. Some of the outside of the Cowboys game, of course. Some of the most cushion to work with, as it were, as far as the win percent or win expectancy is concerned. So really, are the Eagles like the liability there? And like even still,
I think they are.
I mean, I'm like kind of stretching to say that they are as far as actually losing that game straight up. So no, I like where your head's at on that one.
All right, let's go with the underdog parlays of the week.
Okay, so I've noticed that like the big like kind of betting trend earlier in the season was dogs are the way to go. Dogs are life. Dogs are bay. We're starting to see favorites. We're starting to see them bully around a little bit. Favorites were 10-5 last week. So I think I only like 4 dogs this week on a short slate. So like 9 favorites. So it was a little bit tough to find multiple legs here, but I just went with 2.
Okay.
But give me the Chargers and the Giants. That would go plus 750.
And those are money lines, right?
Correct.
Okay, so Giants got to win at home against the Eagles. Chargers, they got to get it done against the Miami Dolphins. I like where your head's at there. I'm throwing out the Nick Whalen murder mystery parlay of the week, John, because I will be going to a murder mystery party here in Milwaukee on Saturday. Yeah, the host, they bought like this kit online. Everybody's got to get in character. We have to dress up. We have to like send texts to other characters throughout the week to set up the storyline. Like this is a pretty big thing.
Professor Plum in this one, or Colonel Mustard?
I think my name is like Greenlee. I am so this takes place in a fictional Las Vegas hotel. So I am a stand-up comedian / professional poker player. That's my character. So kind of fits with what we're doing here. Sports betting adjacent, at least.
Yeah,
so
I think you're going to do very well with that.
I hope so. I've never participated in anything like this, but I want to tie it into the underdog parlay here. I'm taking the Vikings. I'm taking the Panthers, and I'm taking the Arizona Cardinals. That gets you to just about plus 1,100.
Hey, look at that. All right. We found a way to get into the quad digits, as you said, with just 3 teams. And I can totally see paths for each of them. So me gusta.
Okay. Yeah. I'm most worried about the Panthers there. Vikings, Cardinals, those are 1.5 lines. So close to pick'ems at least, although, never feel great involving the Cardinals in any sort of sports bet. I'll say that. Let's get to the teaser of the week, John. Like I said, we were red hot. The first 2 teasers we threw out, won with ease. Last week, the Ravens let us down. Browns Texans total under 53.5. That one hit with ease. Seattle just had to beat the Rams. That was a little shaky, but they got it done. We're going back to the well with another 7-point teaser this week. We are teasing the Kansas City Chiefs down to 2.5. So they just need to beat the Broncos by a field goal. You can see that game getting a little messy. That Broncos defense shows up, could be low scoring. So I want to get at least that 2.5 point cushion. So the Chiefs minus 2.5. We are teasing the Dallas Cowboys all the way down to 10 points. Just got to cover 10 against that lowly Houston Texans team. And we are teasing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers up to 10.5. So I think this is going to be another low scoring game. You look at the total in Bucs Niners, it's 37.5. I think the 49ers win that game, but I think by virtue of starting the last pick in the 2022 draft, this is not a runaway win by any means for the 49ers. So I think the Bucs could keep it, 10-point game or less.
Yeah, and what's crazy is the hook might be like the thing that saves you there. Like I it wouldn't shock me if the Niners win by 10 points. It would kind of shock me if they won by more than that, though. So There you go. But well dialed up, sir.
Exactly. That's the thing is I was kind of I based on like different machinations of looking at these teasers. It's like I couldn't quite find one where I felt awesome about all three, but getting the Chiefs to 2.5 and getting the Bucs to 10.5 with those key numbers, that was big. And then with Dallas, I mean, it's like, yeah, you don't necessarily want to be teasing teams down to 10, but this is a unique situation.
No, it absolutely is. So I definitely like where your head's at.
All right. If you want to tail us, if you want to go against us, as always, make sure you're doing that over at betmgm.com, the BetMGM app, and you're using our promo code BETROTO, BETROTO. Get that first wager risk-free up to $1,000. The time has come, John. Let's lock it up.
All right. I'm locking it in here. I think the Bengals get revenge in a pretty loud fashion in this one. So give me the Bengals minus 5.5. I'm glad that it's moved down. Give me that. Give me all of that. Bengals, Joe Burrow, former Mr. Basketball, I believe, in the state of Ohio. Athlete. Oh yeah. This is cooking. We're staying on the right side of our best bets. We're going Bengals.
Yes, we are, because I am also locking up the Bengals. We have our first double lock of the season. I love this one. This is my favorite lock of the year so far. Does it make me a tiny bit nervous that this number has moved in favor of Cleveland? You know what? No, it doesn't. It does not, because that gives us even more of a cushion if this were to, now end up somehow as a 6-point game. I love it. Give me Cincinnati. They get this game at home. I do not trust Deshaun Watson whatsoever. The only argument I think against Cincinnati is they had their win of the year last year. Is this a potential letdown spot? On paper, sure, you could make that case, but I don't think they let it happen. So I'm feeling great about this one, John.
Yeah, it's any proverbial letdown, any sort of Joe Burrow struggles against the Browns. Nope. Don't listen to those people. They are trying to lose you money. We're trying to win you money.
The Bengals have a division to win as well. They got to keep pace with the Baltimore Ravens, who, they don't look like a great team, but they're lucky to have won 2 of the last 3. They could very well beat the Steelers this week as well. So Cincinnati, plenty to play for, other than just Joe Burrow beating the Browns for the first time. So we are in complete lockstep there, locking up the Bengals minus 5.5. That'll do it. No college football talk this week. All we got is Army Navy. We'll be back. We'll revisit college football in a week or two here once bowl season heats up. Of course, once we get closer to the college football playoff. But thanks to everybody listening along on YouTube. Make sure you give us a rate and review over on your podcast listener of choice. Could be the Apple Podcast app, could be Spotify. You can find us at both of those spots. And as always, use that promo code BETROTO, BETROTO. That is of the utmost importance. BetMGM, BetMGM.com, BetMGM app. Go check it out.